Attention startup leaders. Are you strapped for time but hungry for strategic insights? Introducing Managed Chaos, your go-to podcast for navigating the startup world in less time than your morning commute. Join us as we share expert advice, real-world examples, and actionable strategies to help you scale your business, allocate resources effectively, and achieve visionary results. Tune into Managed Chaos and join a community of like-minded innovators on the path to entrepreneurial success.
We don't have to tell you that being in the C-suite or on an executive team at a company comes with a different set of responsibilities. The most common scenario will be that you step into this role as an outsider, and ideally to manage a healthy, thriving team, although in some cases, build a team from scratch. And as weird as this may sound, do you know what to do if your team could technically function without you? Welcome to the Managed Chaos podcast, where we give you the startup business rundown in less time than it takes for you to get to work. I'm Katrina Purcell.
And I'm Rachel Anderson.
And today we're talking about how you can integrate into an already thriving team as the newest member of a C-suite. So I've done a lot of C-suite hiring as a chief of staff at various companies, and where we always struggle is there's always a need, right? You're hiring because you need someone, but also somehow you're making do without that person. And so when you bring them in, oftentimes they're a bit fish out of water. And so let's start off a little bit with a scenario, Rachel. We're going to pretend that you're a brand new CMO. You've just been brought into a new company. The team already seems to be humming along. What do you do?
I love that we're going to scenario this out. Okay, so I'm a new CMO and I just stepped into the C-suite. I think first and foremost, it should be celebrated that you have a fully thriving team. This is great news. So often, in order for you to get things done efficiently or quickly, you do need other resources, or you need to restructure, or you need to do these like big overhauls to really get people to the next level. And so it's a great thing that you have all that you need to do the day-to-day well. That's a huge, huge plus. So the first thing that I recommend all new hires do, but especially managers that are coming over teams with defined roles and functions, is that you do want to observe and learn. So typically I see in all kind of the best practices of onboarding any person throughout a company that you have sort of a 90-day onboarding flow, where in the first 30 days, you're 25% productive. In the first 60 days, you then go up to 50% in the last 30 days. So that the 90-day mark, you're kind of up to 75, and then you're full after that. So in those first 30 days, it should be all about learning. Who are the people on your team? What do they thrive doing? Where are the, pens in the office and the tactical things you need to do to learn your job, and the people who report into you. And so I want to kind of take a step back at this point and remind the C-suite member that they're ultimately still just a manager. You still are a manager. You're still a program or product manager. And so you can't lose sight of those responsibilities as you step in. And your number one job as a manager is to be the junk umbrella. I don't always use such a nice word, but you have to cover your team members from all the junk that's going to fall towards them. Maybe it's tasks that would be cool but aren't priorities. Maybe it's conflict between other departments or ideas. Maybe it's some sort of other external to the company even situation, like when COVID happens. You need to be able to be the umbrella that really protects them for doing their job. And that's probably the second thing that's good to remind you at this point, is that you're not a doer anymore. That's not your primary role. So if you're really asking, what do I do? The answer isn't really that you're doing anything. That is other members of your team's responsibility to be that individual contributor where you're getting the tasks of things done. And so then the question is like, well, then what is my job, right? And so that's where you're like, yes, that's the perfect thing you should ask them. So what is your job? So as a C-suite member, you're really in charge of culture and expectations, your vision. You are trying to make sure that everybody is aligned to what the business objectives and priorities are. And so as part of all of this, when we were kind of chatting about this, Katrina, immediately I came to mind this article that got very popular this week that was all about something called founders mode. And it was this argument that there's a new wave coming in that executives should go into founders mode, which is essentially this idea that they should be on the ground with the day-to-day processes, and they should be scrappy and doing all the things like they did when they were a founder. And it was just sort of them, or maybe it was them and one or two other people. But that's not going to work as you scale and grow your organization. You have to be able to trust the other people that are doing those things. And you need to be able to step up into a strategic role and really look at how do we want to define what this company is, the ethos behind it, the mission behind it, and how do we really want to see that play out over 3, 5, 10 years. And so in a high level summary of, what do I do? Well, executives are culture. You define culture and you define vision. And then you look at your managers and you say, your reinforcement. You have to believe what I am saying and holding to be true is culture and vision for what we do in this company. And I need you to reinforce that to everyone else. And then the individual contributor on your team is the implementer. They are actually the people. They're going to make that a reality for you.
I agree. There's also this element, they clearly hired for the role for a reason. So even if they are humming along and things are going well, they were missing something. And so talking to the C-suite, talking to the managers that you're now coming in to be above, and really getting the vibe from them on what was missing, why was this role needed, and where can you add value? But really spending those first 30 to 60 days listening, I think is really where I've seen things in some cases go a little awry. So you've learned, you've observed, everyone's doing amazing. So now what? So let's say the team is going really well. Everything's fantastic. You feel like, wait, are they sure they needed me? Why did they hire me? Now what?
Okay. So now if you're really, really sure, you're like, everyone's doing a good job, I'm setting culture, it's here, vision, all these kind of things, then you should start looking for fine-tuning things, because to your point, Katrina, you were hired for a reason. And maybe the reason is as simple as the CEO doesn't have the capacity to do all the things for this team. That's like the best case scenario, is that you can literally step in and say, I'm going to be an incredible manager that supports this team to get things done. And I just have to slot in and keep things running. Amazing. But that's not usually the case. It's usually a little bit more complicated. Like the CEO is like, I don't have time. And also we need these things. And so at this point, start thinking about optimization. So your team's already functioning really well. That's incredible. But can you help them do things in 90 minutes that might take them 100 minutes otherwise? Can you help them to do one less step in their 10-step process? Where are the places that you can really fine tune what they need? And this is something that, I do quite a bit for businesses. I call it process optimization, typically, where you look at the overarching situation and you say, where is my time or energy best utilized in order to make this a better thing rather than just a different thing? One of the examples I like to use here is that when I was in college, there was this 5-sided building that the architects had meticulously planned out. And there's this very deep, meaningful thing about the point of the building, pointing to LAX, which is, I went to college in LA. And so it was supposed to symbolize all people of all kinds from all places are welcome here. This is our cornerstone, all the things. But when the builders actually came to build the plans that the architects had made, it was off by 0.01%, which doesn't sound like a lot. But when you scale it out miles and miles and miles, it basically just pointed somewhere into the ocean. It was not at LAX at all. And so in theory, if you apply this into your team, maybe what you see is that your team is flowing really well, because they've decided to send out helicopters to the ocean and pick people up and then transport them back to LAX via helicopter, right? Well, that might be a great, like, everything's fine, it's working, like people are getting stuff done. But maybe instead, as the new C-suite member, the new CMO, you could just pick up the building and move it 0.01%, and then it doesn't need a helicopter. You can get rid of that helicopter, right? So there's small things like that you can look at for ways to optimize what your people do. Because sometimes that's what it is somebody is not in their zone of genius, as one author and coach called it, but maybe they're like better suited as a strategist. Maybe they're better suited as a campaign person rather than like a weekly production person. So there's different ways that you can really look to optimize your team. And if you think like, oh man, but like we're so perfect, like we couldn't possibly optimize anything, then it's your job to look to the future. What does the future look like? The future state of your team, of your production, of your tasks, of the industry. What does that really look like? So as part of your job, you should be vision casting. You should be looking at trends. You should be trying to predict how to grow and keep up with the rate of the market or the rate of trends. And your team is likely busy putting out the day-to-day fires, and someone has to be in charge of how to do all the things that it takes to make something kind of grow outside of just checking the daily boxes. And so if everything's really humming smoothly and doing, just the best of the best of the best, then I would be looking at optimization and vision casting as the central things that I can bring the most value to that already humming team.
I think the other piece there, and I'll share a little story here around hiring a C-suite individual who I think the CEO thought they were going to bring a lot of value and they were very excited, but then the person kind of jumped in and it was more talking and vision redirection than it was listening and really getting to know the team and really getting buy-in. Because when you come in as a C-suite leader, you really have to get that level of buy-in from the team. You have to be able to be sort of a master of change management and really understand what motivates the team and what's going to get them excited. Because in many cases, they may have been up-leveling themselves to play this role before it was filled. And there could be some, hurt feelings around an outsider being brought in versus an internal promotion. And so in terms of being sort of a C-suite leader, what recommendations would you have for that?
Yeah, I think it's really tough sometimes, right? When you're in that leadership position, but I think I would try to remind leaders that there's a lot of different ways that you can define kind of success in that role. Part of it is making sure that you're managing down, which we've talked about mostly in this podcast so far, but it's also managing up. So one of our episodes, we talk a lot about building boards and what does that look like for success. And part of your responsibility as a C-suite member is to, in fact, report up to the board and report out to your peers. And so part of being successful as a C-suite member is building your brand as a leader. What kind of leadership style do you have? What kind of leadership person do you want other people to see you as? How do you communicate to others and build strong relationships? How do you strengthen the connections between your team members and the team members of other teams that you have to collaborate with? And so there's really kind of a plethora of places that you can bring value that are outside of the literal doing or the literal like team management. You can also think about how to replace you. At some point, you want a promotion, right? You want to be able to promote yourself out, even if that's a reducing of people count or a different kind of program, a product, or like there's ways to still, promote up even within being a C-suite member. And so how do you train up the next person to take over those things? How do you make sure that you also have room to grow and to remember to work on that for yourself as well? So, there's a lot of different things that kind of play into that. And you can have a wide variety of success if you look at this really from a holistic perspective.
Exactly. I think it's so important that, as we start to take on new roles, taking on a new C-suite role is not entirely different than taking on any new role. You need to listen. You need to understand where the team is at. You need to set the expectations, have a clear understanding of why the team has hired you and what they'd like you to do. There's a little bit more onus on the C-suite because there's an expectation that you are coming in with a specific level of executive presence, that you're coming in with a specific understanding of perhaps the industry or the niche market, and that you're going to be able to provide instant value. But there shouldn't be a desire to add instant value over the collaboration with the team and making sure that you're getting along and really working for the betterment of the company, which is the whole reason you were hired in the first place.
Yeah. And I just want to enter one more thing because you made me think about this, and I think this is really important. So as a CMO, I don't see this as much because a lot of what I do is very internally focused. But you just said something that made me remember, what about CFOs? What about chief product officers? Sometimes they're evangelists. What about the CEO? Those kind of roles too. You have a responsibility to the public, especially if your plan is to go public. Then you need to be good at being able to report out and show what kind of culture or what kind of company this is, what kind of success it is. And all of that is part of that exact same mindset.
Exactly. So this has been another very insightful episode of Managed Chaos Podcast. Please like, subscribe, and follow us anywhere that you listen to your podcast. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode.
This was another informative episode of Managed Chaos, the podcast for startups. You can find us on all of your favorite podcasting apps, as well as on Instagram and YouTube, where we are at Managed Chaos Podcast. For additional resources or to continue the conversation, you can find Katrina Purcell and Rachel Anderson on LinkedIn.